Despite the almost religious reverence that the framers of the Constitution had for the role of news media, a nonpartisan news media that puts the truth first and truly aims to inform citizens in a republic has never been the reality.
CBS's parent company, Paramount Global, will shell out $16 million to President Trump to settle a lawsuit waged over a 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris that aired weeks before the presidential election. Trump claims it gave Harris an unfair advantage.
Kamala was unable to answer a question properly, and they took the question that they asked and they inserted an answer.
In his lawsuit, Trump accused the network of misleading voters with, quote, deceitful editing of Harris's answer to a question on whether the U.S. has any sway over Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's the Worth Knowing live stream, and we're on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube, my very own Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and indeed, the fact that we're on so many platforms is in a very meta way what I want to talk about today, because the last few weeks have really reanimated the conversation about the role of news media and the slow strangulation of news media, whether by market forces or their own hand or a combination of both. The news business has always been an odd chimera, a hybrid of two very different animals. It's right there in the words I just used. News business. News, journalism, is part of the architecture of the American Republic. It's a function that's literally built into the operating system of the United States in our Constitution, in the First Amendment. Thomas Jefferson famously said that he would prefer newspapers without a government to a government without newspapers. You can't have a democracy based on group decision-making unless people know what they're making decisions about. Otherwise, they might as well just pull voting levers at random, which honestly, right now, would probably yield better results than what we have. So the idea of news in the American context takes on almost scriptural importance. But then there's the other half of the phrase, business. It's an oxymoronic pairing with the lofty ideals of journalism, and it goes just as far back to the birth of the Republic. News media, such as it was in the late 1700s and early 1800s, was partisan, sensationalistic, and vicious. A man named John Fenno founded what was arguably the first national partisan newspaper in 1789 called the Gazette of the United States. And yeah, he could have taken Justin Timberlake's advice from the movie The Social Network and just called it U.S. Gazette. It's cleaner. But it was essentially a semi-official mouthpiece for George Washington's administration. Thomas Jefferson decided to respond in kind by supporting a rival publication called the National Gazette in 1791, and both papers were filled with scathing attacks and accusing opponents of tyranny and sedition and corruption. But that's where the business side of the news business began to evolve and shape journalism. By the 1820s, a new business model called the penny press arose that tried to appeal to a broader mass audience. And look, it wasn't necessarily better. These newspapers, like the New York Sun, founded in 1833, focused on crime and human interest stories, but they were less overtly partisan. And the evolution, of course, continued in the ensuing decades, driven by what could sell. And eventually, as technology developed, the market competition moved into radio and television. The point is, despite the almost religious reverence that the framers of the Constitution had for the role of news media, a nonpartisan news media that puts the truth first and truly aims to inform citizens in a republic has never been the reality. Even the recent story about the capitulation to Donald Trump over the Kamala News interview on 60 Minutes is just an echo of an earlier incident from 30 years ago about a spiked tobacco industry story that got pulled for fear that it would mess up a different corporate merger at the time with Westinghouse. They even made a terrific movie about it called The Insider. I hope you've seen it. But at the same time, even acknowledging that partisan media is nothing new, sensational media is nothing new, market forces changing what works and what doesn't in the media is nothing new, there's no denying that what we're seeing is another major turn of the crank right now, because we not only have a rapid evolution in technology changing the media marketplace, the business side, we also have a petty tyrant in the White House who's called the press the enemy of the people, and who has no shame or hesitation whatsoever in using the full force of the United States government to hammer the business side of the news and make them bow to him. So this leads to a ton of questions. Can the more lofty aims of journalism survive these combined forces? How can individual voters and news consumers navigate what's becoming a media minefield? And maybe most important, is there perhaps some silver lining, some light at the end of the tunnel here? Are we going through a period of creative destruction where there's an opportunity for media to innovate and thrive and get better?